coming up on Wrestling Life.
Everything about him, when I think back when I'm Mr. Perfect, was just perfect. That entrance music was just amazing. I think just a great worker, really selfless guy. He wasn't afraid to put guys over in his career, and he did. And I think he did a lot for the business and the guys around him. He should have been world champions, not just once, but I think many times over. I think one of the great Intercontinental champions.
This is Wrestling Life with Ben Veal, the show that celebrates wrestling's past, present, and future with real talk from real talent.
Welcome, my friends, to a new type of Wrestling Life episode. For the very first time, I have a co-host. I'm very, very excited to say joining me today is the People's Broker, Ajaz. Ash, how are you?
Ben, it's great to join you. And I just want to say what an honor and privilege it is to be sharing the screen with not only someone who's the fastest rising wrestling journalist, but someone who's also an author on Amazon's bestseller. So yeah, I am stoked, man. I think this is going to be great. I'm looking forward to it.
I love that. I've brought you in to put you over, and you're usually putting me over.
I put you over, man. I put you over first. Give before you can receive, right?
Absolutely. I appreciate that. Well, look, Ash is a dear friend of mine. We've been talking about this idea for a while. We've been kicking around this idea of what could we do together. We love having a conversation. We love talking wrestling. We've got very, very similar kind of backgrounds in terms of our love for the sport. We've been thinking for a while, what's a concept? What's something that we can do as a series? And so today we kick off with the first episode of that series, which is Gone Too Soon. That's what we call in this series, wrestling legends that are gone too soon. The stars of yesterday who we wish were still with us today, who I selfishly wish I could be interviewing here on Wrestling Life. This is the next best thing. We're going to dissect and break down the careers and the trajectories of some of those incredible talents that are gone too soon. And Ash, we're kicking it off today. I said to you, who should be number one? Who should be numero uno? And there was only one choice, wasn't there, for you? So who is under the spotlight today, Ash?
Well, as we were talking about, it has to be a perfect start.
It does.
And who is more perfect than Mr. Perfect?
Now, this is the point when I wish I had a towel and some gum to bat out as this guy.
Wait, I don't have anything. Sorry. I would thought about it before when we were planning it. I'm like, maybe that's what I would do, but next time.
Alas. So, how old were you when you first discovered the brilliance of Mr. Perfect?
Oh, I'm trying to think. I think I was very young. I'm trying to just jog a lot of my memories. So a lot of this stuff, I know we were talking about it. I know previously we've talked how we got into wrestling. Like everyone has a story, right? How did you become a fan? For me, I think I've been a wrestling fan for as long as memory serves me. And I first started watching it with my dad. So whenever dad was watching it, obviously I would hang out with him. I would sit with him and we'd watch wrestling. And back in those days, obviously, I think I'm talking late 80s. There was no weekly TV shows and things like that. And as a kid, I didn't really quite follow and understand the storylines as much. There was no Raw. So it'd be like catching it when it was on, or maybe a tape or something like that, and watching special events. And I think when it comes to Mr. Perfect, I think I first kind of got to know him maybe in the sort of the late 80s, early 90s, especially from those those vignettes he was doing, of Mr. Perfect, the baseball, the football. I mean, I was loving it. I mean, that was it for me. I was like, ooh, that's interesting character. So he was very unique. And I think that's what really got me about him.
Yeah, I think, those kind of hitting the perfect shot, the perfect golf swing, the perfect baseball shot, the perfect basketball shot, it was just incredible, perfect dive. Yeah, I think for me, it was, I've spoken a lot on this show. Like, I'm a 1992 guy. That's where it all begins for me. SummerSlam 1992, and then so much of my wrestling fandom has worked backwards from that point as I discovered all of those incredible legends that I fell in love with in the early 90s. So obviously, by the time I discovered Mr. Perfect, that was when he'd been injured for a long time. And was basically playing this kind of second fiddle to Ric Flair. And so I obviously remember him coming down the aisle at SummerSlam 1992, being involved in that Macho Man and Ultimate Warrior match. It would only be a year or two later that I'd really discover just how incredible a worker he was. And if we kind of take it back to where this all begins for Mr. Perfect, I mean, he's born in March 1958 in Robbinsdale, Minnesota. Larry Curt Hennig is his dad. So, you know, it's in his blood. And I think, you know, that we've seen a lot of second generation stars in this business. And I think it just makes such a difference. I remember having a conversation with Alex Wright on this show, obviously the son of Steve Wright and very successful WWE performer in his own right. And Alex kind of talked to me about how he was like, he can remember some of his earliest memories are like crawling around the wrestling ring. There's something about being second generation that you just get it instantly, and we've seen it so much from Bret and Owen Hart to Randy Orton to Randy Savage to obviously Curt Hennig to obviously The Rock being third generation. He obviously gets off to a great start, having such a legendary father as Larry Curt Hennig.
I mean, it's I mean, I'm just coming in. It's like, it's just quite natural, you know. I think the kids taking on their parents, father, mother's legacy, like it goes in the normal life outside wrestling, like other careers and stuff. Like, you know, you're around that type of thing, those conversations, that type of people. So your love interest kind of grows in, and then you find, you know, I could do it. And then your parents kind of want at least one of the kids to follow that legacy, that like, come on in, you know. So that type of thing, probably.
Waiting for the people's broker and kids is coming. The next generation, you're already priming them.
Yes, it's in the works.
So he debuts in wrestling in 1980. But the first time that Curt Hennig really comes on the radar for many is when he gets a big win over Nick Bockwinkel in 1987. Can't kind of overstate just how huge that was and what a mark of respect that was for Nick to be putting over Curt in that time. The time that, as we say, he really comes onto our radar is when he moves over to the World Wrestling Federation. And I think it's somewhat overlooked, really, or lost in the annals of time, that he had this perfect 2-year undefeated streak. We've talked about the vignettes and kind of how he was introduced, but for 2 years, you know, Mr. Perfect was untouchable. And it's interesting to kind of look at what the career would have been like if we were where we are today with whatever 7 or 8 hours of episodic fresh television a week. I mean, you can't really imagine a newcomer coming in and having that kind of undefeated streak for that long in today's world. But these were different times.
I think he kind of like set that stage. So he was like one of the first ones who did this undefeated streak kind of thing that I could remember. And then it was kind of replicated with, you know, Kurt Angle when he had, he had like an undefeated streak. And in my mind, I think those days it would have been so perfect if Mr. Perfect had returned and broke his streak or something like that. Or obviously when Goldberg did it in WCW. So I feel Mr. Perfect kind of started it, but I think in previous time, I think there was other champions in the 70s and 80s and stuff who did it, obviously with Andre and various people. But I still think, like, for us, Mr. Perfect was that guy, and he did it with style and so much more to offer.
Yeah, he did. And there's a question of whether or not, you know, how much of that was to really set the stage for a main event run with Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
Because the two of those, you know, Hogan and Hennig would feud a lot in the early 90s in the WWF. But that match never happened on a grand stage. We never saw that at a Royal Rumble. We never saw it at a WrestleMania. Why do you think we never got Mr. Perfect and Hulk Hogan?
Firstly, this thing about their rivalry and stuff. I didn't even really know about their rivalry because, as you said, it was off TV. It wasn't that much on TV. So such a shame that it wasn't. I think the issue is maybe we didn't get, as they say, it's for anybody, it's the time and the place, and you're in the right place at the right time type of thing, right? And if you look at the roster, the WWF in those days, the roster in the early 80s and the 90s, like, it was an absolute stacked roster. I mean, we talked about it, like, there were so many guys that I feel are so underrated who were never world champions, who would be like world champions any day right now, like guys like Piper and obviously Mr. Perfect is one of them. Later on, like Razor Ramon, who's one of my favorites, Scott Hall. I mean, these guys, they never got a chance. So I think it was that stacked roster, and always someone was there to take that place. Hogan was obviously the man, and it was anyone going against Hogan. So I think he just got a bit unlucky, and then I think that injury didn't really help him. So I think a little bit of luck and a little bit of the fact that it was an absolute stacked roster in those days, I think.
I mean, you talk about timing as well. I mean, we're talking 1990 here. We haven't really got the blueprint apart from Randy Savage. Yeah. The wrestling world has kind of moved into this like bigger is better model under the Hulkster. Yeah. So it's hard to. The thing is, like, Mr. Perfect right now, right here and now, you could absolutely see him as world champion. He would fit in like a glove right now. But in 1990 WWF, it's hard to imagine him with the top title, even though he would have been so perfect for that role. Like, pardon my pun, but he would have been. And you're right. I mean, obviously, like, Roddy Piper is another one that's incredible that he never became world champion. Jake the Snake Roberts, how was he never world champion? British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith. There's a list of names that you could see running, leading the company, but just never happened.
And this was so interesting. You mentioned Jake the Snake Roberts, because I was like listening to someone the other day, and they had interviewed Jake the Snake, and they asked Jake the Snake that question. They're like, what? Why didn't you push to be put into the title picture or things like that? And Jake goes, I mean, he's such a humble guy. Obviously, he's been through a lot in his life and stuff. And he goes, you know what? I just knew my role in those days. I knew what my role was clearly. And I wasn't too bothered about being world champion. I know everyone who comes in this business, their goal is, that's what in any industry, you want to be the top dog. You want to be the man. You want to be part of history when you're champion. There's so many people who've been champions, which I wish they never were, especially in the recent last 15 years. But in those days, I think, it was such a shame. I mean, Mr. Perfect was definitely one of the guys on my list. And I think Piper was another one. I think I asked this question with Ric Flair once. I was in a live audience, and I asked him, who does he think would have been, he mentioned Piper. And I was like, I was thinking Mr. Perfect. But yeah, because they were quite connected with each other. And I know we're going to come to that. But yeah, that's quite interesting.
So Ric Flair felt that Roddy Piper should have been world champion in WWF.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's hard to argue that. I mean, I know we're going off piece a bit, but we're talking about similar kind of workers here. And I think when we kind of look at the role that Mr. Perfect played and Curt Hennig played in the whole kind of wrestling sphere, in many ways, he embodied what it is to be the workhorse champion. So whilst he was never world champion, very, very few wrestlers had such a significant run or made the Intercontinental Championship as meaningful as Mr. Perfect. I mean, he's undoubtedly in the same conversation as Razor Ramon, as Shawn Michaels, as Bret Hart, in terms of names that are synonymous with that championship, which in many ways, certainly throughout our younger years, overshadowed the WWF title. The Intercontinental Championship was always the match that I cared about seeing most. And I think that has shaped my direction and love of wrestling. The matches on the card that I'm most excited by.
I think the Intercontinental title, it meant so much in those days, right? And just the design of the belt, I absolutely love that belt, especially the one with the white strap, or even when Warrior had it with a yellow strap. It was just something about it, right? And I think Mr. Perfect, maybe he should get more credit for maybe putting that belt on the map, because that belt was introduced like, I can't remember the exact year, but I think it was like later in the 80s, or I think mid 80s. But him kind of like really making that belt what it was, having the run he had. He had that rivalry with Texas Tornado when he unfortunately lost the belt. I mean, he was still going through some injuries, but the next thing he regained it. So if you think about it, that he had like almost like a 1.5, 2-year run with that belt, or being involved with that belt, and that really raised it. And then later on, I know I don't want to spoil it, but like one of the greatest matches he had. So we'll reveal it later in the show.
I think I know where you're going with that. I mean, but yeah,
okay.
The feud, great feud with Brutus the Barber Beefcake as well. I mean,
yeah,
another guy who I think is really overlooked in terms of actually what he brought to the table and how kind of synonymous he was with that time. But I loved the chemistry between those two. And you're right. I mean, I think when I think of the iconic white belt, it's hidden away up there, but I've got the white belt behind me on the shelf, and that for me is the quintessential wrestling championship.
Yeah.
And Mr. Perfect with that title, it just looked perfect. It just worked. It just worked on every level. So much of this leads to a match that I'm sure is what you're alluding to, which is SummerSlam 1991, Madison Square Garden, Curt Hennig, Mr. Perfect, Bret the Hitman Hart. Go on, Ash. I know this is a personal favorite of yours. Take it away.
You know, when you asked me about Mr. Perfect, when I first discovered him, I think it was that match, watching that match that really, and I know with the vignettes and all that stuff like that, but I think it was that match. And I actually recently went back and rewatched that match because it just came up on my YouTube feed, and I was just watching it. And I feel like that match was ahead of its time, the way, and I think again, Bret Hart, probably one of the greatest, of all time, and Mr. Perfect is up there, and seeing those two go at it, the intensity of that match from the bell, as the bell goes, oh my God. And the other thing is, and what made me appreciate that match even more now, learning the fact that Mr. Perfect was wrestling that match with so many injuries that he had. He had like a broken tailbone. He had like bulged discs. So I'm knowing these facts now. I'm watching this match and I'm seeing it, and I'm feeling something extra watching this match. Like, oh my God, that must have hurt him. How the hell did he do that with that injury? So it just made me appreciate that match so much more. And I think it wasn't a long match. I think it went, 15, 16 minutes, something like that. But yeah, I think that's SummerSlam. I don't remember any other matches from that card. I remember that match.
I believe that was the marriage one, wasn't it? The match made in heaven. Made in heaven. So it was all kind of built around Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth's wedding.
Yeah.
And I think again, that's two guys with a point to prove. That's Bret on the cusp of main eventing, and let's be honest, that match probably was the real tipping point towards that trajectory beginning for him. And then Curt not knowing whether it's his last match, and if it is, going out in as you're supposed to in this business, putting someone over and doing the best job possible.
I know Bret Hart was always like that tag team wrestler. We knew him, and then he kind of transitioned into singles. And I think that match really put Bret over and made Bret what he was. So I think, again, credit to be given to Mr. Perfect, Curt Hennig, for that. And, I think I've heard Bret talk about it in one of his interviews about these matches and what that meant to him to be put over by Curt Hennig.
I'm Mark Merrill, former WWE Intercontinental Wrestling Champion and 3-time WCW World Television Champion. I am thrilled to announce the release of my new book, Bad to Good. The inspiring story of a wrestling wild man chronicles the highs and lows of my life, both in and out of the wrestling ring. It's a powerful narrative of overcoming adversity and the importance of perseverance, no matter how tough the journey gets. co-authored with my good friend and award-winning journalist, Ben Veal. This is a story I've long wanted to share, and I truly hope it inspires you. I hold nothing back in this book, revealing the untold truths of my extraordinary life, from my modest beginnings and my first boxing match to the struggles with addiction that almost consumed me and my evolution into the charismatic Johnny B. Bad. This book offers an insider's perspective on the world of professional wrestling and my journey as a sports entertainer. You'll read about my pivotal negotiations with Vince McMahon that led to the first ever guaranteed contract in the WWF and how that decision marked me within the locker room. I discuss the impact of my relationship with my then wife, Rena, known to fans as Sable, on my career. I also confront the darkest moments of my life, how I hit rock bottom and how that experience sparked my rebirth, leading me to become America's leading motivational school speaker, inspiring young people and transforming lives. Featuring forwards by my good friends Diamond Dallas Page and Lex Luger, along with contributions from Mick Foley, Eric Bischoff, Vince Russo, and others who shared this wild journey with me. Bad to Good is a story you don't want to miss. Head to Amazon.com or WrestlingLife.online now to pick up your copy.
Well, it's just such an iconic finish. I mean, that's one that always stands tall for me, like Bret kind of being there with his kind of the blue ripped singlet of Mr. Perfect over his shoulder, with a title belt, going up and celebrating with his mum and dad. Like, just such a beautiful moment in Madison Square Garden. And as you say, that could have very well been it for the career of Curt Hennig. For all intents and purposes, it looked like that was it. He was forced to retire after that match.
Yeah.
So it seemed his body was broken, which is just, you talk about timing in this business. Like, think where that match could have led him at that time. You know, Hogan's on the way out. The Ultimate Warrior hasn't really caught fire as a champion. They're very much in this kind of transitional space, kind of leaning back towards Randy Savage, who they veered away from in the 80s, but now actually realizing the star power's waning, and who's their next guy going to be? Obviously, we know Ric Flair's going to come in. You just think, wow, what could have been if Mr. Perfect had been able to build on that momentum? I have to believe that he would have been very much in that conversation to be world champion.
And the timing, like we keep going back to the timing is everything. So this was just post the steroid trial and the whole issue and stuff like that. So you could see the change, kind of like change of guards, like the going from those big guys to these more athletic, technical guys like your Bret Hart, Ric Flair, the Macho Man coming back in, and a few other guys in the mix. And yeah, you're absolutely right. If Mr. Perfect was healthy, I think he was above all these names I mentioned. He could have had an amazing rivalry with Ric Flair or continued it with Bret or whatever. He would have definitely been world champion, I think. Even though I think he played a little bit of a part. We're fast forwarding a little bit in that WrestleMania 10 finish when he was that special guest referee.
Dastardly heel.
And he turned on Luger, obviously, because Luger, they had a match at WrestleMania 9 the year before and the rivalry and stuff like that. And so I think if he was healthy, could have been something amazing there, and yeah, would have been awesome.
I think so. I mean, the point that I encounter him, as I said, is 1992. So really the first time I'm introduced to Mr. Perfect is when he's a talker. That is it. He's become a personality. He's not a wrestler anymore. And one of the things I think that set Curt Hennig apart so much, I mean, he was just such a fantastic stick man. He was just incredible on the microphone. And I mean, it's very rare to find someone. You mentioned Kurt Angle earlier. He's one of the few others, I'd say, who are just as incredible in front of the microphone as they are inside the ropes. Yeah. And so Mr. Perfect, when he's forced to kind of move into this kind of color commentator role, but also firstly kind of aligning with Ric Flair and Bobby Heenan, it just works so well. And I think in many ways he was that glue when Ric Flair comes over. There is a portion of the wrestling audience, as crazy as it seems, who didn't have that much knowledge of Ric Flair. There are diehard WWF fans who were WWF fans and then WWF fans who grew up on that product and didn't watch the Atlanta product. So there did need, I think, to be those kind of transitional voices to help, really consolidate Ric Flair in the fans of WWF, in the minds of WWF fans. And obviously, he had Bobby the Brain Heenan, the greatest manager of all time.
Yeah.
Having Ric Flair and Mr. Perfect together as a package was just sublime, in my opinion.
I mean, you're talking three of the greatest people on the mic. I mean, Bobby the Brain Heenan, I would have to say probably the best color commentator of all time. I think his work is just priceless. It's like, who needs to watch sitcoms or anything? Just listen to Bobby Heenan talk. He made a comment in that match, I still remember, between Bret and Owen, and he made a comment. I think they show Stu and Helen in the crowd. He's like, oh, they look really, really worried. He's like, do you know why they're worried? He's like, why? He's like, because, they snuck in here. They don't have a ticket. Or he made a joke about that. And then obviously, Ric Flair, another amazing talker. And then you got Mr. Perfect. So it was just, whoa, three guys on the screen. And we still remember that after post 1992 Royal Rumble, three of them. And
with a tear in my eye.
Yeah. It was an awesome, I think, trio. Yeah. It was. And then, all of them are amazing. And Mr. Perfect was really good on the mic, definitely.
And so he's obviously left wrestling behind for a period, but he's so central to the world title mix at this time. So I always remember the lead up to WrestleMania 8, which was the first Mania that I really was familiar with in the Hughes Dome. And I remember all the speculation about these kind of photos of Miss Elizabeth that allegedly had her in compromising situations. You never quite learned what she was up to. But all these kind of photos and how great Mr. Perfect and Ric Flair were at kind of building,
insinuating,
the insinuation, like just pure heel heat, all for the payoff at WrestleMania 8. Just fantastic.
Yeah, that was. That could have been a much better main event, I think, for obvious reasons. I think it could have been just about Flair and Macho Man, and it would have been so much more. But I think it was just a bit of a schmoz, too much overbooking, I think, at the end of the match. But Mr. Perfect played a pivotal role, I think, in that rivalry and kind of building that match up and reaching it to that level.
I quite like. I always thought WrestleMania, their WrestleMania 8 match was pretty solid. Really, I think the one that for me really kind of didn't meet the mark was SummerSlam '92. So when it's Macho and Ultimate Warrior, and it's just this big kind of mess. Hard to think that was ever at one point going to be the main event at Wembley Stadium, and incredible to think what it could have ended on if it hadn't ended on Bret and Bulldog. But again, Mr. Perfect's in the mix there. He's getting the heat. Which corner is Mr. Perfect going to be in was such a big thing leading into SummerSlam 1992. It's still a catchphrase that me and my friends use to this day. All this build up again because Mr. Perfect is he's just such an important character, and so the idea that actually he has sway, and if you've got Mr. Perfect in your corner, you will be the world champion. Just says so much about that star factor that he brought to the ring. I think this was his time as well, where he had like his kind of spangled suit jackets with Mr. Perfect and Diamante and everything like that. So just looked the part, was the part. And, right through 1992, really, he's there as the kind of heater in the Randy Savage, Ric Flair feud. He's kind of plays a big part in Savage dropping the belt to Flair. But then we had to do a real big about turn, and I think this is what shocked a lot of people, because suddenly he's been retired for well over a year. Ultimate Warrior has to very suddenly leave over steroid scandal, and before we know it, Mr. Perfect has turned face. He's turned against Ric Flair, and he's main event in Survivor Series 92.
Yeah,
and I remember that shocked me, I think, because I hadn't ever seen him in a ring really by this point. So I was like, oh, wow, I'm so excited to kind of watch what this guy can do in a ring. And very, very sudden, just has to happen. I don't know how much time went into him kind of learning about, his ability to step back in the ring, whether going into a tag scenario was just a way to kind of test the water and see what he could do. But obviously incredible to have him back in the mix. And when it gets to early 1993, Ric Flair's done. He's had his
Yeah.
time. He's had his WWF experiment. It hasn't worked out.
Yeah.
He's heading back to WCW, and well, who gets the joy of retiring him but Mr. Perfect himself in a very significant loser leaves town match, probably the first really big moment that happened on Monday Night Raw.
Yeah, I mean, back in those days, those type of matches and stipulations, I think, meant a lot more. Like, we knew when it was a loser leave town match or a retirement match or something like that, it meant something, you know. I mean, so that was big. Like, I don't know. I mean, there was no dirt sheets or anything like that. So we didn't know what's going on. We didn't know the stuff we know now, that Flair was going to leave. He was going to go back to WCW. His contract was finished or whatever. But yeah, that was a big moment, I think. And it was on Raw. So not even like on a pay-per-view, but it happened on TV. So to see a match of that caliber on TV, that's just unbelievable. I think that was amazing. That was.
Yeah, and it's a big step change because we're not conditioned to seeing big moments like that happening on TV.
Yeah.
Like, oh wow, so this is what Raw's going to be like. And here we are 30 odd years later.
Yeah.
It's, still enjoying those moments. Incredible.
Yeah. And I think moments like that in the early days of Raw really kind of put the stamp on it. Like, it was like a new thing, weekly wrestling on TV every Monday night. So they had to do big stuff, they weren't monthly pay-per-views still. I think at that time, if my memory serves me correctly, they were still like mainly they were like 2-3 months apart. So I think doing stuff like that on Raw. So then you were like, ooh, it's I mean, we were gonna watch it anyways, right? It's only 1 hour every week. We're not gonna miss wrestling for 1 hour every week compared to now. It's like, I can't even know 20,000 hours.
Isn't it crazy?
You have to pick and choose.
1 hour a week of wrestling we had at one point. Isn't that incredible? And I felt like that was spot on, to be honest. I know I'm speaking against the grain here, but I'd love to have like,
what that
wrestling a week.
I felt so that feeling in those days, obviously quality over quantity, right? As we always believe in. I lost that feeling, and I got that feeling back when NXT Black and Gold era between 2015 and 2018, I want to say. 1 hour a week. You can do so much in 1 hour. It just goes to show you. You can have 4 matches. You can have promos. You can build things. 1 hour is so much more. And it was so good. And then you'd have takeovers, one takeover every 2-3 months or something like that. So that feeling was back. And I was like, whoa, this is just like when it was back in the day in the early 90s, 1 hour of Raw and then a pay-per-view every 2-3 months. So yeah, absolutely spot on with that.
Less is more, people. Less is more.
Less is more.
So 1993 ends up being, quite an interesting year for Mr. Perfect character, because you look on paper at some of the feuds he had, and it feels like we should have got so much more in terms of memorable moments. He has this match at WrestleMania 9, arguably the worst WrestleMania of all time, although I have a real soft spot for it in Las Vegas. But there he is against the Narcissist, and it's a real throwaway match. I mean, it's one of the best, if not the best match is on that card.
Yeah.
But that is a very, very, very low bar. It feels like that should have gone further. And why that didn't, maybe the Narcissist and Mr. Perfect is just a bit too close in terms of gimmick for that to really work.
Yeah. Because, I mean, it could be like a similar gimmicks if you could think about it. Like, one is a narcissist, the other one thinks he's Mr. Perfect or he's perfect. So it's kind of like similar.
Yeah. Is it too much? Yeah.
That WrestleMania, well, as a kid, it was quite interesting. It was taking place outdoors in daytime, which was first time like, whoa, this is unique. This is interesting. So we were enjoying it. But now it's hard to watch it back now. But yeah, if you look at the card, that probably was one of the top matches on that card, between those two guys.
I always remember The Undertaker coming to the ring with a vulture essentially coming into a tennis court in the middle of the sunny Las Vegas sunshine. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I think the other one was in that match, if you remember, the Luger and on Luger's entrance. Obviously, the ladies are like holding this mirror, and it's got this reflection from the sun, and also because of the wind blowing, they couldn't do the fireworks or whatever they were trying to do. So it's quite interesting. I think that WrestleMania is.
Yeah, it's definitely one that I don't know. Every few years I'll go back and watch it because I think for me it's just kind of peak. You know, I'm a 9-year-old boy discovering World Wrestling Federation for Sicker album for the first time. You couldn't possibly tell me at that time that was a bad WrestleMania. I thought it was the best I'd ever seen.
Yeah.
And nostalgia is a very, very powerful thing. It doesn't matter how much of a great wrestling you see in your life.
Yeah.
You're always still drawn to those first memories, aren't you?
I mean, that's what exactly. I mean, for us, like wrestling, we've been wrestling fans as long as we can remember as kids. And for anybody, your childhood memories are the best, right? It's the best time.
Should be,
so you watch a match now, you're like, ooh, where did I watch this? Where was I? What was going on in my life at that time? So just bring back happy memories, you know?
Yeah. Well, a happy memory for me. I know that peak Mr. Perfect for you is 1991 SummerSlam. For me, it's King of the Ring 1993. That is as close to a perfect match as I think I've ever seen or ever will see. There's just so much I love about the match between Bret and Curt. Semi-finals in the tournament.
Yeah.
Undoubtedly the best King of the Ring tournament of all time in terms of storytelling.
Yeah.
I miss the King of the Ring format so much, and especially the 16-person King of the Ring tournament.
Yeah.
I hated it when they started diluting it down and it was just the semi-finals and then the finals, and obviously now it's moved to Saudi and it's just the finals. I love a tournament. I know that was a Vince McMahon pet hate, the tournament, and I live in hope that perhaps under the Hunter regime we might get tournaments back again. But for me, 1993, obviously as a Bret Hart fan, was everything. But that match between Mr. Perfect and Bret Hart for me has the edge over SummerSlam 1991 because I think we're really seeing Mr. Perfect at his peak.
Yeah.
And I just, everything about it. It's hard to describe. Sometimes just matches have a feeling, don't they? And for me, that one is the one.
I think very contrasting if you compare the two matches. So again, recently I've gone back and watched both matches. And as compared like the 91 match, the SummerSlam, fast paced, they're starting in fourth gear, bam, go, go, go. And it's a quick, short match. I think, as I said, 15, 16 minutes. While their match in King of the Ring 93, it went much longer. I think it was like 21 or 22 minutes, something like that. And it kind of slowly starts out quite slowly, and then it kind of like builds up how you kind of want the match to be. I mean, it could even be maybe 91, probably because of injuries he was struggling with, Mr. Perfect. Maybe they had to do it that way. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I'll agree with you on that. The 93 King of the Ring, that was an awesome match. Probably the best match of that tournament. I mean, in that tournament that night.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Two of the best guys.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, just, I mean, if ever there was a title that would be perfect for Mr. Perfect, it would have been King of the Ring.
Yeah.
And you have to believe that if circumstances had been different a year or two later, he'd have also got the crown because it just would have fit that gimmick so sublimely.
And you know, I mean, we're talking about in that tournament. I think even a Bret Bigelow match later on, that was an awesome match too. But yeah, Mr. Perfect, Bret Hart, that has to be the better one.
Yeah, so that's always a match I will show to people if they say, "Why do you love wrestling?" Just watch this. A feud that feels like it should have done so much more, but never really satisfied expectations was Mr. Perfect and Shawn Michaels in 1993, and we see them face off, and it's it's okay, but it's again SummerSlam 1993, which is a dire show. Probably as good as it got on that show, probably the best, but we don't get a definitive finish and we don't really get a really good prolonged feud between the two of them. And I feel like that was such a missed opportunity. Maybe, again, timing wasn't right. Maybe they were just too similar, but I just feel like a Mr. Perfect Shawn Michaels longer run could have been something absolutely incredible.
Again, you're talking, one of the best of all time. And I mean, HBK, another one of my childhood favorites. I was always kind of, as a kid, I was always switching between Bret and Shawn. I was like, and especially when it was Bret versus Shawn at WrestleMania 12. I think I was supporting Shawn at the time, I think. But
he tells me this, now he's my co-host.
But, I think my very first wrestling t-shirt was, I think, Bret Hart, but the second one was Shawn Michaels. But yeah, that feud, I still remember, that brawl that they had on the top of the car, and it was unreal on Raw. So that's still classed as one of the top 10 like moments of Raw. So yeah, that feud, it could have gone a lot further. I think you're right.
Yeah, and then talking of feuds that could have gone a lot further, as you mentioned earlier, we get to WrestleMania 10, and Mr. Perfect is there as the special guest referee in the Lex Luger Yokozuna title match, screws Lex Luger out of the win, and again, another feud. I don't really know the backstory there. I'm not sure what happened, but we never really got that big run between Luger and Mr. Perfect, which again felt like there was a lot to it. I mean, by this point, Lex had lost a lot of steam. It was WrestleMania 10 really was make or break, and I think there was no way that groundswell of popularity that Bret had as the kind of underdog could have been overcome. I think Luger's time had passed undoubtedly by SummerSlam 93 after he didn't get that win.
That was weird. I mean, WrestleMania 10, I think it's one of my best favorite WrestleManias, mainly because of the ladder match. I think the first ever ladder match, and then Bret Owen as the opener, and probably the greatest opener of any pay-per-view, they say, ever in history or something like that. But yeah, that was a bit of a weird one. So it's him suddenly turning heel again, and I think he said something about, because what happened in WrestleMania 9, and then that's kind of like they're trying to like connect the dots and do long-term storybooking. It didn't really work for me, I think. And again, Luger had lost a bit of heat.
Do very often. They very rarely. I was reading an interview with Drew McIntyre recently where he was talking about how under the Triple H era, WWE has got a lot more comfortable with referencing back things that happened in the past and channeling that real human emotion. But actually, you wronged me 3, 4, 5 years ago. I haven't forgotten. That was something we didn't see very often. It was almost like wrestling used to be. It was almost quite transactional. You work towards the feud builds to the payoff, then you move on. It's like it never happened. So it's actually quite rare to have him referencing something from a WrestleMania previous.
Even though I think one of the greatest WrestleMania builds of all time, as they say, is the I think was it WrestleMania 5, Macho Man and Hogan, that build. So that's long-term storytelling, and they're connecting all those dots and the mega powers and all those things, right?
Yeah.
So I just don't know why they couldn't do it. And you're absolutely right. It just became transactional, like how quick heel turns were, how quick things were without explaining why it's happening. But I think the beauty of wrestling is those long-term. I mean, wrestling fans are not stupid. We have long-term memories about stuff, right? We still remember stuff. So it makes it more interesting, a storyline, when say, "Ooh, yeah, I remember. Well, I remember that John Cena, CM Punk 12, 13 years ago, that, match." So if they kind of brought them back together, they could make references to it. We remember, so it's just, it kind of was, I think maybe under Vince, maybe it was like a Vince thing, he didn't really like that.
Yeah.
He never made references to anything outside WWF. It didn't exist.
No. And, we're going to see Mr. Perfect exit the WWF in the not too distant future. But before that, we have him as a color commentator. So throughout a lot of 95 and 96, he's back in that role. And I mean, he was just fantastic. Him and Vince McMahon, I loved the banter between the two of them. Again, It might be nostalgia coloring my lens here, but I just thought Mr. Perfect was incredible in that role. So fun. I could listen to him talk all day. And we see him in 1996, and this is one that's very dear to my heart now because obviously I've spent so long talking to Mark Mero for the book.
Yeah.
He gets paired with Wildman Mark Mero in 1996 as this mentoring role alongside Sable.
Yeah.
And we see, which is a curious kind of combination. They don't feel like comfortable bedfellows at all from day one. That feels like a really, really weird trio.
Yeah.
And when the Wildman beats Farouk to become Intercontinental Champion in September 1996, it feels odd looking back to see Mr. Perfect there in shot in that ring. It just feels like a person that doesn't fit with the other person.
Yeah.
We know where that's going. Where that's going is a turn. Mark Mero aligning himself with Triple H and turning on Mark Mero for what should have been a feud. That was what Mark was hoping for. We talk about this in the book. Mark was really, really hopeful that he was going to get a run with Curt Hennig, who he felt was one of the best all-time workers, and he felt that his style would mesh perfectly. But that doesn't happen because pretty much as soon as Mr. Perfect executes yet another heel turn, he's gone. He is WCW bound. He is the latest big name to leave for Atlanta at a time when it felt like everyone was jumping ship. And that really is the end of Mr. Perfect for many years because, of course, Mr. Perfect name is trademarked. WWF owns it. So we are back to Curt Hennig. And obviously, he was mentioned as Curt Hennig, so it's not like that name was unfamiliar. But for so many years, he was Mr. Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, I remember those times. I think when Mark Mero first came in, he debuted from WCW. In WCW, we know him as Johnny B. Bad, and he came to WWF at the time as the Wild Man. Yet that was a bit of a weird pairing. You were like, there's a Wild Man, and then there's a Perfect Man. So, like, what is the relationship? And yeah, I remember that match. I think it was on Raw when he beat Farouk in that match. And yeah, Mr. Perfect is in the shot. So it was a bit of a weird one. But then, like, if you remember the whole thing when Mr. Perfect used to come out and steal Hunter Hearst Helmsley's valets, and he used to. So that was all a ruse, but I remember that.
And again, another feud. What could have been if we'd really got a Triple H and Mr. Perfect feud as well. A lot of things left on the table, but I mean, in many ways, it was the right move for him. I mean, at a time when everyone was jumping ship. In many ways, he jumps at the right time because when he does join WCW, Curt makes a really strong debut. He's paired alongside DDP, going up against Randy Savage and Scott Hall. In classic WCW style, he turns on Page in that match. So he goes from face to heel in his first, arrival in WCW. But what a powerful way to make an impact.
Again, talking about timing, imagine if he stayed in WWF at the time. There was no one really there in the world title picture. It was just Bret or Shawn. Hall and Nash had already left. So it was that time where, again, if Perfect stayed, he could have been then in the mix because he was head and shoulders above a lot of these guys. And then he was over to WCW, who again had a bloated roster. Pretty much the 1992-93 WWF roster was the WCW roster at the time. And again, but good for him. He made that choice. He was in the mix with all the big guys, and then it was again an awesome debut for him in WCW.
I think one of the problems, Ash, is kind of perception is reality, and by the point of like 1996. He's either been Intercontinental Champion or a manager or a color commentator for so long. I feel like he's in that same realm that Randy Savage was when he left for WCW.
Yeah.
I don't think that you could have ever plugged him back into the WWF title picture by 1997. I think in the fans' eyes, he'd probably had his time, and the time to have done it would have been 6 years earlier. And I think, that was a big reason Randy Savage left WCW. I don't know if there was similar reasons with Curt Hennig, but I know with Randy Savage, he wasn't happy with being put in that color commentator role.
Yes.
He felt like he had much more to offer, and that was true because he goes to WCW and becomes world champion a further 3 times.
And I agree with you that. So, when they turned Macho Man and made him a color commentator, I wasn't happy about it. I was like, why is he a commentator? He should be in the ring wrestling. And sometimes he used to interfere, or he would have something, or he would end up having a match with somebody and stuff like that. You're like,
I'm also going to be really controversial here. I actually didn't really like him as a color commentator. I loved
he wasn't all that.
It was such a distinctive raspy voice. It was better in small doses. It was a lot. Whereas Curt Hennig was so good on commentary.
Subtle.
Yeah.
Subtle. Yeah.
There's a thing that, like, they say this in business, like, if you don't want to do something long term, then don't be really good at it. And like that was almost a problem. Like Curt Hennig was so good on color commentary, but it was kind of hard to argue a case for why he shouldn't be doing it.
The thing is, like, Macho Man was such a big character as a wrestler. That's what he was, a big character, colorful, that voice and stuff like that. But when you want to like go into commentary, you kind of have to change it. Mr. Perfect had that. So even when Mr. Perfect used to cut his promos, he wasn't what those traditional 80s promos like, that type of thing. It wasn't like that when every promo sounded exactly the same. Yeah. His promos were different. So I think that's why he was able to transition a lot easier into commentating.
Yeah. What's interesting about Curt Hennig kind of joining WWE is he turns on page, but that doesn't immediately lead to joining the NWO, which is what you expect. He's actually recruited by the Four Horsemen. These kind of two dueling mega groups are kind of both vying for his attention. And he joins the Four Horsemen, which just seems like such a perfect fit in many ways. And not long after wins the US Championship from Steve Mongo McMichael. Something that was really curious to me in my research, I was looking through this timeline, like this forgotten feud and thinking, wow, what could have been if this had been in the WWF? Curt Hennig joins Rick Rude, who again actually is another one I'd say missed off our list earlier in terms of people who should have been WWF World Champion and weren't ever. Curt Hennig joins Rick Rude to battle Bret Hart, Davey Boy Smith and Jim Neidhart in the aftermath of Montreal. So the three of the biggest stars in the WWF in 1997 suddenly arrive in WCW without any direction and are plugged into this feud with Curt Hennig and Rick Rude that goes nowhere. It does lead to a tremendous match at Uncensored with Bret and to Curt Hennig beating the Bulldog at Spring Stampede, but nothing to it. Like so much of WCW in this era, if it wasn't the NWO and if it wasn't Goldberg, it's just two people in a ring, nothing at stake.
I'll be honest with you. So that era, my memories of that era, so I didn't really follow much of Curt Hennig's run in WCW because that era, I'll tell you what it was for me. You had to decide which show you wanted to watch in those days because both shows were on head to head, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. They used to both come on head to head. So you had to pick and choose. There was no such thing as streaming services. In those days, you had to either record one show on VCR while watching one, and sometimes you got it wrong because it just didn't work. But a lot of people used to do that. But then for me, just 2 hours. So you had to kind of pick and choose. So I chose Raw to watch Raw. So I wasn't watching much of WCW at the time. And then, you were absolutely right. But sometimes I used to kind of go in when something big was happening, like Goldberg. That was a big thing. But a lot of the other stuff was just kind of like copy and paste. You don't know from week 1 to week 2 what's going on. So unfortunately, I don't think I'd watched much, but I think now I can go back and watch some of that stuff and try and appreciate it.
I mean, there's just so much happening at once, so much talent. And did you used to commercial hop? Did you jump from one to the other watching it in the States?
Yeah, not so much. I mean, it was something, because the thing is in late 90s, like WWF, you couldn't really, because the matches were so short. So you couldn't really, if it wasn't like a boring match, it was so short matches. And before you like switch back, oh crap, what happened? It was a DQ finish or something happened. Someone interfered, someone jumped in. But the storylines and the promos were so interesting. Ad breaks you couldn't switch between because both places were doing ad breaks at the same time or something like that. Sometimes you'd catch it, and they started to come out with this thing when Raw would start at 7:57, 3 minutes early, just to catch that audience, right? And then Nitro started doing, we'll go past 10 o'clock. So don't, we have the time on TNT and TBS.
We own the network. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but then another thing Nitro did, they went 3 hours. So they started watching at 7 o'clock. And so it was just getting ridiculous, I think, at the time. But yes, sometimes you kind of end up catching it. 3 hours was too much, even in those days, I think,
3 hours is still too much, without question.
A lot right now, I think, as well. 3 hours. But there's nothing in it. It's just filler now.
Yeah. So we have more injuries facing Mr. Perfect. He gets sidelined again in WWE. Obviously, this has been a recurrent theme throughout his career. When he returns, he joins NWO Hollywood. So we've now splintered off into NWO Wolfpack and NWO Hollywood. And he actually faces Goldberg for the WCW World Championship at Bash at the Beach. Obviously, he's fodder for Goldberg.
Yeah.
At this time, no one's beaten.
Who wasn't?
But still, it's rare that we see Curt in the world title picture. It's been years and years, really, since the days that he was challenging the Hulkster, that he's there in the mix. So just to be back in there shows what WWE felt of him, and also how relied upon he was to, because they all obviously knew with Goldberg that they had to have the right opponents to feed him and to give him those matches on a pay-per-view level at that time. And it's a solid match. It is obviously ultimately is what it was. It's Goldberg getting the win, but good to see Curt in the mix there.
Yeah, I think it was really good to see that. I think again, well deserved, and I think that happened with a lot of the guys in WCW that in WWF maybe they didn't get their flowers. I don't know if it's a right term, but they didn't get pushed to the level that maybe WCW kind of gave them that chance. And one of the big ones people talk about is WWF never did Hogan Flair. Yeah. That could have been the match. And what was the first match WCW did as soon as Hogan debuted in WCW? It was Hogan Flair. They were smart like that. So I think it was nice that WCW did those type of things. So yeah, it was great to see Mr. Perfect, Curt Hennig, in that title picture again. So it was really good for him.
Just the idea of Curt Hennig with the big gold belt just feels like a beautiful thing, especially at a time when the title was changing hands so much. You think it's a shame that we couldn't have fallen back on a proven hand.
And I'm surprised why he wasn't the world champion in WCW, even when you had guys like Jeff Jarrett. Jarrett, he's all right. He has his place. But if you compare Jarrett to if you had to pick Jarrett, Curt Hennig, easily, you can say, yeah, Mr. Perfect all day world champion. But just a shame he didn't even get that chance there.
He does, though, get a chance to have a feud with Flair. So these two are back 6 years on from 1993 Loser Leaves Town. They're feuding in 1999, which is great to see again. I mean, there was a lot with WCW where it does feel like you're just treading over old storylines, but I think there are some tandems that people just want to see together. And Flair and Hennig, as you say, wrestling fans, they don't forget. We all remember the moments, and we want to see these pair partners again. But the thing that my overarching memory from WCW and Mr. Perfect, for better or worse, because I really remember WCW Worldwide coming over to, I think it was Channel 5 here in the UK. We got a WCW television deal. And the West Texas Rednecks appear. And I remember they had their song Rap is Crap. I don't know if you remember that, Ash, but they had this kind of anti-rap song, which was just tremendous.
I think I have vague memories of it. Like I said, this is talking about late 90s when WCW was just becoming so hard to. One of my really close friends, who was like my wrestling friend at work, he used to do that. So he would watch Raw with me, but he would tape WCW and watch it later that day and stuff. So he always used to kind of fill me in and all these things. And I say, what? So some of that stuff was a bit cringy, but then some of that stuff was quite interesting. But yeah, that was an interesting one.
Well, so much of that era was cringy, but there's just something about this that worked. I mean, the song was fun. It was great. It was catchy. I can still remember it all these years later. It's a real earworm, but it just felt like those guys were having fun.
Yeah.
And I think wrestling at its heart, you can tell when the performers are having a blast doing it. And such a departure from the Curt Hennig that we have all grown up with and got to know, seeing him rocking a cowboy hat and singing along to that. But I don't know. It's just, I think at that time, like, the barriers were broken down when it came to performers. People were being their true selves. People were having a bit more fun. It felt like anything went in WCW by the end of 1999.
Yeah, I think the wrestling fans were getting to learn about the actual wrestler, like who that person is more at that time. I like internet had now been around for a few years. So that was a big thing, I think, compared to like early 90s. There was no internet. So I think that played a big part in kind of peeling that veil. So I think that was interesting. So I think maybe it was nice for the guys. They could be themselves or say, listen, I can do this, maybe try that. So yeah, that was quite interesting.
What is interesting is that Curt leaves before the buyout. So he actually leaves WCW in the summer of 2000, heads to the
before the sinking ship.
Before the sinking ship, he heads to the Independents, and most notably, he's one of the key hires for the XWF. So this is looking to be like the new Hulk Hogan machine. They bring over a bunch of talent and a bunch of money, and you've got Hulk there, you've got the Nasty Boys, you've got Buff Bagwell, you've got Vampiro, you've got Mark Mero and Sable and Roddy Piper. So there's a real kind of talent pool they've got, and they are legitimately going to try and go head to head with the WWF. So the WWF has become the only show in town. WCW has gone under. ECW is no more. And for a brief moment, the XWF looks like it could be the number 2 contender. It doesn't happen. But what does happen is Mark Mero's dream match, that he gets to have an incredible match with Curt Hennig in the XWF. I know from speaking with Mark that that's genuinely one of the highlights of his career, and that Curt was one of the greatest workers he ever shared a ring with. But it's crazy to think, like, obviously it wouldn't be that long until we got TNA, but the XWF for a brief window of time looked like it was going to be the next big thing, and how different the wrestling landscape could have been if it had been able to get television time, but it just didn't happen.
Yeah, that would have been so good. It would have saved us like many years of watching the stuff we had to watch for 15 odd years until NXT came around.
Well, it may have done. I mean, obviously it was a promotion that was kind of buoyed by an era of talent who were kind of left astray by WCW. So hard to know where it would have gone. Would it have actually become a feeder territory for new up and coming talent like TNA, or would it have just been WCW light? It's hard to know, really. We never got the chance to see.
I think because, unfortunately, in those days, TV deal was everything, right? There was no streaming services. There was no internet like YouTube and stuff like that. So you didn't have any other outlet. I think if there was more outlets, maybe they would have had. They could have made something. I mean, they had the talent. They had all the big names. They could have done the marketing and stuff. And people were looking for an alternative, as much as people were excited to see, okay, some of the WCW guys coming over to WWF and what's going to happen, how they're going to react. Initially, we didn't get the big names we did in WWF. Even that storyline with the invasion wasn't the greatest, because it could have been like the XWF invading WWF.
That's the understatement of the
exciting.
Century from Ajaz just then. The invasion wasn't that great.
It was what it was, but again, like you wouldn't believe those 5 guys from WCW could beat those 5 guys from WWF. That's why Stone Cold had to become a guy of WCW, and then they had to make the whole ECW part of WCW as well to give them somebody.
Hot mess.
It's nuts.
So crazy times for the WW, what is still the WWF at one point. I vividly remember where I was, 2002, Royal Rumble. Some moments just stay with you, don't they? And I remember Mr. Perfect's music hitting in the Royal Rumble match, and this huge pop he gets. And it's just like he has turned back the hands of time. He's in there. Incredible. It comes down to the final 3, which is just such a strange thing to see in 2002. Absolutely beautiful, nostalgic moment. We've seen similar things before. Like I remember when Kevin Nash came back as Diesel in 2011. You get these odd moments, but I think Mr. Perfect's return was just incredible. But then it just all fizzled out, and there was
Yeah.
no real follow through. Kind of, he was in the mix with all the kind of top talent.
Yeah. I
No one was doing
remember
anything.
I remember that Royal Rumble. I was at this big bar where they were showing this Royal Rumble. I was with a friend, and he was another one of my friends who used to watch wrestling as a kid. He kind of lost touch with it, and I had told him, I said, "Yeah, let's go watch the Royal Rumble. You know, so and so is going to be coming back." He said, "Oh, Mr. Perfect, yeah, of course, yeah, that was one of my guys." And then when he came back, and initially, you know, when these guys come back, you don't expect much from them in a Rumble. They're going to get eliminated after a few minutes. But for him to go to the end, I was like so excited. I was like, yes, Mr. Perfect. Maybe, you know, you were hoping and thinking that he would win. But it was great. It was great to see him there in the end, till the end in the mix.
Yeah, it was incredible, and you all hope that that's then going to lead to another great run. But as I say, it just doesn't happen. He's on Raw, but he's just like, after that night, he's just one of the guys. It's just not special. I think it's just the time.
One more note about that Royal Rumble. So he had that interaction with Triple H, obviously the guy, Hunter Hearst Helmsley. So I don't know, they didn't make, again, too much reference to it, but they could have maybe told that story a little bit better, I think, when he came back. So maybe they could have done something there.
They could have done, but again, I think the WWF was always notorious for kind of leaving that stuff in the past, like the Hunter Hearst Helmsley of 1996 and the Triple H of 2002. May as well have been two different performers in the eyes of fans, you know, and they didn't really ever retread back onto, oh, this is the old aristocrat that used to come in to that music. It's just kind of, they moved past it, don't they?
He hadn't married yet in the mid 90s. So by 2002, Triple H was married well. He was a different guy.
Still had his ballets in 1996. It's a sad kind of departure from WWE by that point, by May 2002. Curt Hennig is let go after the notorious plane ride from hell. Back from the UK after the Insurrection show. There's been so much kind of conjecture over the year about what happened on that plane ride. Allegedly, Hennig slapped shaving cream onto Brock Lesnar's head, which kick-started all of the craziness going down. We don't know what went on. We weren't there. All I know is it's a very sad way to end what was an incredible run within the company.
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit weird and sudden. I mean, 2002 still was a bit of a weird year. I think that summer was horrible, I think, in WWE then, when Stone Cold, I think, decided to leave. The NWO, they tried to push NWO. It was weird. It was a weird time. Like, I stopped watching, I think, that summer.
The brief period where there was like the Big Show, Shawn Michaels, X-Pac, and Booker T in the NWO.
And they turned on Booker T, and then a few weeks later, I think Triple H turned on Shawn. It was just a weird one. And it was like they were just trying to. I think that summer I didn't watch it, and it was hard to get back in. And then in all that shuffle, Mr. Perfect was gone. I mean, you weren't really noticing him much prior to those weeks either. Like I said, post Royal Rumble, wasn't he like being put in hardcore matches or for hardcore title? I can't remember, right?
Yeah, just there, and I just think, wow, it's like Mr. Perfect is like someone we grew up with who was such a big part of our childhoods, and then suddenly. Just didn't fit. Even though he could still hang, just didn't fit. And he's off. I mean, we do get a bit of a brief run in TNA, and this is really his last hurrah. Back in the world title picture for what that's worth at that time, wrestles Jeff Jarrett and Ron Killings over the course of 3 different world title matches. Obviously doesn't win, which again, you think, how? In many ways, like a company of that, you think how?
Even against those guys.
If Kurt Angle's available, Kurt Hennig is available, you think, how are you not TNA World Champion?
Just for the lineage of the belt, sometimes, if you think about it, just for the lineage of the belt, getting Mr. Perfect's name in there, Curt Hennig.
Yeah, and I mean, this says it all. His final match in TNA is beating David Flair in an axe handle on a pole match. I don't really know what that is. I don't want to know what that is.
Did you say X handle on a pole match? That sounds like a Vince Russo booking to me.
Yeah.
Something on a pole. Something.
Anything involving David Flair and something on a pole is a match that I'm not going to go out of my way to rewatch, I'm afraid.
Didn't they have like a crowbar on the pole once or something like that as well? I think it was David Flair.
Had Judy Bagwell on a pole once, if memory serves. Oh man, crazy times. But yeah, very, very sadly, we lose Curt Hennig, age 44. Like so many wrestling tragedies, found dead in his hotel room in Brandon, Florida. Gone far, far too soon. Survived by his wife and 4 children, 2 of whom have now entered the wrestling business themselves. Of course, Curtis Axel has gone on to the most success there. He would go and follow in his father's footsteps, become Intercontinental Champion himself. Yeah. And I believe, Ash, he is still yet to be eliminated from the Royal Rumble.
He's still in there. Yeah, he's the longest. He's still in there. Paul Heyman guy. Yeah. Once, maybe he could come back in this feud with Roman and CM Punk. He could be that third guy. Yeah. Let's see who he sides with, because we always wonder, Mr. Perfect, so who he sides with. That could be interesting.
Curtis Axel being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that could be interesting. Yeah.
What could have been, eh? But I mean, that pretty much wraps up our dive down Mr. Perfect lane. I mean, there's so much we could have covered. I'm sure that there's many things that we've overlooked, and no doubt that's what the comments are for in YouTube. So we will be told. But in your mind, greatest Mr. Perfect match, you have to pick one. What goes it?
It's a tough one. He had many amazing matches. Comes down to the 2 matches he had with Bret. For me, I'm going with the SummerSlam match they had, the first one, him putting Bret over, and not for the fact he was wrestling with those injuries. Now thinking about it and giving that performance and that title run, it meant so much, that Intercontinental. He elevated that title, so that match was just elevated. And for me, it's got to be that one.
Yeah, and for me, as we talked about, King of the Ring '93. So yeah, incredible. Well, I mean, when you kind of think about Curt Hennig and his legacy, what do you think the greatest legacy is that he's left behind in his wrestling life?
Very unique guy. I mean, everything about him, when I think back, when I'm Mr. Perfect, was just perfect. Just from those singlets he used to wear, the colorful, bright colored ones, even to that music, that entrance music was just amazing. I think just a great worker, really selfless guy, I would say. He wasn't afraid to put guys over in his career, and he did. And I think he did a lot for the business and the guys around him, and even early days when he was tag team champion with Scott Hall in the early 80s, when he was first debuting and stuff, starting it there and then kind of progressing on and stuff. I still feel, if I think back, I was like, definitely maybe underrated a bit, I think, compared to some of the guys who have made it, who've been world champions. He should have been world champions, not just once, but I think many times over. I think one of the great Intercontinental champions, I think, for me.
Yeah. Couldn't say it better myself. Well, look, on the subject of putting people over, it's my time to put you over. I've absolutely loved this. This is our first of what will be many, Ash. We are going to be exploring talents that have gone too soon, and not necessarily always talents that have passed away, but maybe talents that, due to injury or circumstances, left wrestling way before we were ready for them.
Yeah.
So we've got many names lined up for this year and beyond. But before we get to that, Ash, how can my audience follow you and keep in touch with the People's Broker? Plug away, my friend.
Thank you. No, if you want to get in touch, you can follow me at People's Broker. I'm on all the social media platforms: YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. So yeah, you can connect with me there. And yeah, we would love to hear your thoughts about this. And maybe the audience can also suggest some names for future episodes, maybe who they would want to hear about or know about, because I'm sure there's some interesting stuff they learned today, and maybe there's some names they want to do. So we'd love to hear from you guys.
Absolutely. So get in touch, drop us a comment on our socials. We are at Wrestling Life Online. You can find us pretty much everywhere.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you're watching this on YouTube, leave us a comment. Leave a nice one if you can. That's always pleasant because we do read them. That's really it for today. I've loved being joined by Ajaz, the People's Broker. I, of course, have been Ben Veal. This has been Wrestling Life. So until next time, be good to each other, pay it forward. I'll see you soon. Bye.
See ya.